Well, I know that it is so difficult for any victim to be told that the perpetrator might be let out early. And the progression model that is being put in place, which has not resulted in early releases yet, but will be put in place, is being done so to ensure that there are enough prison places. But when you do see the progression model, there are then robust processes in the community so that we do see tagging. And
You're talking about robust processes. I'm telling you now, there are people listening to this interview right now who know that their perpetrator is coming out of prison and they have nowhere to turn. They have nobody to call. And you are telling me that this process is robust. There's a growing backlash against the government's early release scheme. Victims, many of them women, have been receiving letters telling them that their abusers are going to be released early from prison, sometimes as early as September. Well, Catherine Atkinson is the Victims Minister and joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
Why are men who've been jailed for sexual crimes, domestic abuse, grooming gang violence, why are they allowed to be released early?
Well, I think we are trying to face the disaster that was inherited with our prison system. The previous Conservative government closed 23 prisons. They closed loads of courts, including half the magistrates' estate, and they privatised probation, which was a disaster. We had an independent report by Sir Brian Levison, who has set out what needs to be done in relation to our courts, and we have had to ensure that we are stabilising the situation so that there will always be a prison cell when dangerous offenders are sentenced to custody.
Well, under the terms of this scheme, that is a Labour scheme, there had to be protections for women, and they are often women who are the victims of these perpetrators, including risk assessments and a dedicated victims hotline. Are those things in place?
I am absolutely determined that there will be support for victims, and I want that as soon as possible. But what we saw over many years under the previous Conservative government and have is emergency releases that weren't planned and where people weren't told properly. So it is absolutely essential that we have a resilient process, that we ensure that it's done in a planned way. And while we are building prison places at a record amount, with the fastest prison building programme since Victorian times, we've already delivered over 3,000 additional prison places. We do need to ensure that there is. I understand that,
but you're the Victims Minister. Nicole Jacobs, who's the Domestic Abuse Commissioner, says the planning for that hotline, which is designed to help victims who are worried about the early release of their perpetrators, she says the planning for that hotline hasn't even begun. Is she wrong?
Well, Nicole Jacobs, who does a fantastic job and who I have met on several occasions, has been meeting regularly, as has the Victims Commissioner, with Lord Timpson, the Prisons Minister, because there is a determination that we put in place the support that is needed.
I'm sorry, is that hotline, has anyone begun work on that? Because these women are receiving letters telling them that the perpetrators of crimes against them, some of the most horrific crimes that anyone will ever experience, that the perpetrators are being released in a couple of months' time. Is that hotline working yet? Has it even been started?
Well, I've certainly had meetings on the hotline and more broadly on victim support services. So I do want to ensure that it's delivered as quickly as possible.
So the answer to that is the answer there is no. So neither of those things are yet in place.
Well, I think that's not quite what I said. I said I've already certainly had meetings on it, and I've been clear that it has to be delivered as quickly as possible, because we need to ensure that enough victim support is in place prior to these releases happening.
And yet these women have already had letters through the post,
yes,
landing on their doormats, telling them that the perpetrators will be released, and there is nowhere for them to turn. There is nobody for them to call. There is no hotline for them to speak to find out more about those risk assessments. Jess Phillips, who was the Safeguarding Minister, said that the releases of these men, and they are almost all men, must not happen before risk assessments have been done. So what kind of risk assessments are happening now? And can you guarantee the safety of these women in every case?
I think we do need to be clear that early releases have been happening for years and years. What this government
and
is
there are
absolutely
exemptions in that emergency legislation. There are exemptions which do not exist in this legislation. So this will apply much more broadly than it has applied in the past. That's why these risk assessments and the hotline are so important.
They are absolutely important, and having a stable plan to ensure that releases are happening in a way that is planned, as opposed to the emergency releases we've seen in the past.
But where's the plan for these women? Where's the risk assessment?
The reason that we've seen victims communicated with, those who were signed up to be kept informed, is because this government wants to do things in a transparent way, not left till the last possible moment, or in many cases what we saw before was victims not being told at all.
Minister, forgive me, you are leaving this to the last possible moment because there is nowhere for these women to turn. The Sun today reports the rape victim has been told not only that her attacker will be freed early, but that he, an Afghan national, will now not be deported, despite a minister saying that he would be. How could someone like that have been let down so badly?
I do want to ensure that people are not let down, and that was why those who were potentially in the position of having offenders released early were written to. And of course I want to ensure that there is wider support for them. But that doesn't detract from the fact that even though we are building prison places at a record pace, we need to ensure that there is a clear and stable plan.
And I understand that, and our listeners will understand that. They understand that if there is not enough space, something has to happen. But the only condition for this to be allowed, the reason why MPs were comfortable with it, was that there was enough protection in place for these women who are going to have to deal with the fact that their perpetrators are going to come out of prison early. And the truth of it is that those protections are not in place right now. That girl I just talked to you about, the report in The Sun today, she was 17 when she was raped. Her attacker was jailed for 9 years in 2022. She's now been told that he'll be released early under these reforms. Are you comfortable with that situation that I've just described there?
Well, I know that it is so difficult for any victim to be told that the perpetrator might be let out early. And the progression model that is being put in place, which has not resulted in early releases yet, but will be put in place, is being done so to ensure that there are enough prison places. But when you do see the progression model, there are then robust processes in the community so that we do see tagging. And
You're
one
talking
of the
about robust processes. I'm telling you now, there are people listening to this interview right now who know that their perpetrator is coming out of prison and they have nowhere to turn. They have nobody to call. And you are telling me that this process is robust. Will the deportation changes that are set to be announced to remove a grooming gang leader today, will they be extended to include men like this Afghan national, men who do not have the right to live in this country, who are here, who have committed crimes? Will they be deported?
Well, we have seen that the Home Office has been determined and is working hard to have a solution for cases like that of Shabir Ahmed, who was a vile predator. We don't want this man in this country, and there is ongoing work to ensure that we can get to a place where he can be deported. But it is really important just to stress on the progression model, the reason that victims were written to where there was a risk that their perpetrators might be let out early is to ensure that they are able to be engaging with the process so that they can feed into licence conditions and that they are a part of that. I utterly understand that it must be a really, really difficult thing for a victim to be told that their perpetrator might be let out early, but I do want to ensure that victims are able to feed into those licence conditions.
I have to ask you, just before you go, a couple more questions if I can. Labour MPs have reportedly put together a dossier of, quote, not very nice MPs, 30 MPs and peers, half are Labour MPs. There are 3 senior ministers reportedly on there, 2 former ministers, and it's inappropriate behaviour, it's bullying, it's sexual advances. What does it say about your party that they feel they have to do this?
Well, I'm not familiar with that dossier. We should never have bullying and inappropriate behaviour in politics, and I certainly would hope that actions would be taken to ensure that that doesn't take place. But before I go, I was really hoping to be able to talk about what was an absolute historic moment for Labour that so many people have been waiting for, because the Public Office Accountability Bill, which many people know as the Hillsborough Law, which is about ensuring that public bodies where they fail and people die are open and transparent. It's something that so many people have fought for so long, and I am really pleased that we are in a situation where we are hoping to make progress to get this over the line.
And you've made that point. Finally, do you believe that the Parliament's summer break should be delayed so that Andy Burnham can speak to Parliament after he's made Prime Minister?
Well, I am very well aware that the summer break is not a break for most MPs or those in government, and that it's an opportunity to make sure that you are back in your communities, but also there will be ongoing work through the summer for government too. So I think that there is plenty of work to be getting on with.
Catherine Atkinson, Victims Minister, thank you for your time.
Here's what I understand, Kate. So just listening to that and looking at the breakdown of people in prison by offence. So the biggest category of offence for people in prison is violence, 24,000 people. The next biggest is actually sexual offences, 15,000. But if I were to draw up a list of people to be released early, there are other offences I would go well before I got to people who've committed sexual offences where there are victims, which is the problem you're discussing. The problem, people are being released and victims say, quite rightly say, I don't want this person released early. They committed an appalling act and I feel unsafe.
And victims are always going to say they shouldn't be released early, and that is as it will always be. I think the point here is this government was allowed to make these changes based on the fact that there would be protections for victims, because some of these perpetrators are people who will have pursued these women. They will be domestic abusers. They will be people who do things which don't quite meet the threshold of being prosecuted, but make these women's lives unlivable. And these people, unless they are monitored, unless there is a proper risk assessment, there is a real risk here to the safety of women and children and families. And this government has been allowed to do this as long as those protections are in place. And there are women now receiving letters who do not have the guarantee of those protections.
But I go back to a first principle. Why are they letting people who've committed sexual offences out at all? There are 6,000 people in prison who've committed theft. I'd let them out before sexual offenders. There are 9,000 people in prison who've committed drug offences.
Well, I mean, and they will likely be on much shorter sentences. I think the problem here is those on longer sentences and the prison capacity. It's a huge problem, and governments successively should have built more.
I totally get that, but why not? But if there's 85,000 people in prison, why don't you get rid of 15,000 who've done drug offences and theft?
So I suspect that we may be talking about different categories of prisons, but I think we're going to have to look into it a bit more to find out where the stretch is.
Because there's an interesting question: why people who've committed sexual offences why are they being let out at all?
In an ideal world, they shouldn't be.
No.
But I think when we all accept we've got a problem, we've got to deal with the problem. We've got to do something about it. And this, by the way, has been a successive policy over many years.
The Conservatives did it as well. Absolutely right.
But the protections have been guaranteed, and right now they're not there.
I just wonder whether they must have looked at this, but maybe it's not possible. But you've got to imagine someone said, maybe just don't let out violent sex criminals at all, and then try and make our changes elsewhere to limit our chance of doing that, but they've obviously not managed to do that. Very strong reaction of that coming into the response from the government. They haven't put in place all the protections, but is that on them or is that on the Conservatives? They want to make it the fault of the Conservatives. Not everyone is accepting that excuse.